One of the topics I wanted to cover has to do with the plumbing involved with doing gardening or lawn care work. I have a selection of items on my table here, coming from the piping of the house, through the hose bib, through some washers, splitters, adapters, to the hose itself, then some shut-off, some quick disconnects, and then some hose and sprayers. So let's go through each one of these and kind of understand what kind of things to look for if you're trying to maximize the water flow in your particular setup. You'll be surprised at some of the things I found out when I looked at this. So in my measuring, I'm using my caliper and I'm measuring in numbers of 1/64 of an inch for all the dimensions I'm going to talk about. Now, in the United States and many places, the main service line into the house is a 1-inch copper pipe that then goes through the meter, and then it's distributed as in 3/4 inch pipe major trunk lines, and then next down to 1/2 inch and maybe even smaller at times to go to different places in the house. Now, running up to my hose bib, we have a 3/4 inch line, but in order for me to adapt into that connection there, I have to neck it down to a 1/2 inch pipe. But what's interesting is, I don't know if you can see, I'll try to take a better picture of this, but inside of this pipe there's a restriction, and I actually measured that, and it was shockingly only 22/64 of an inch. So the way these frost-free fittings work in our area here, the shut-off knob actually goes in, and the actual valve is at the very back end of the tube itself. And if you actually look at this, it's only got a few openings, and the seat that I talked about, which was the 22/64, is where this rubber gasket meets. So there's a major restriction just going out of the house using this particular kind of frost-free bib. Then the other aspect is, again, I'm not sure you can see it in this case, but this particular hose bib has got a kind of a rectangular channel cast into this metal. It's actually not very big. So before I even get out of the house, I've got some major issues with the water restrictions. So I'll take that into account in whatever plan I have to increase my water flow to the outside. Just to give some numbers on this 3/4 inch copper pipe, the inside diameter is 50/64, and the inside diameter on the 1/2 inch pipe is 36/64. So the restriction I have coming out of the house is mainly driven by that frost-free valve setting at 22/64. The next thing to look at after you leave the hose bib are some of these splitters that people use now. They make them out of cast aluminum, just cast metal and plastic, and then I'll show you another style in a little bit here. The key thing to look at here is the ball valve, which gives you the opening for the water, is what really restricts the flow. Now, the measurements on these two cast ones up on top are only about 20/64 of an inch openings, even though we have a much larger opening going in. Some of them will have a plastic insert, which will also be in the 20 to 25 millimeter width range, but they're also restricted by the size of the hole for the ball valve there. These plastic ones sometimes have a little bit bigger opening because of the ball valve there, but they may also have another restriction on the outside. These two particular plastic ones have 25 and 26 64th openings. So something to look at there. Even though it might be big going in, what's coming out might be just one small little opening, and that's all you're going to get feeding down the rest of the line. There's a couple more styles that you probably might be attracted to in the stores. They have basically the same function as the ones I just showed. The big advantage is they are a little easier to screw on, but if you look at the opening on this particular one, it's worse than all the other ones that I've been showing. It's only 22 64th opening for that ball valve there. A better one here is this one that you can see necks out wider. So they did attempt to give a little bit of better opening for the ball valve. So there's a much larger opening inside of there. It's on the order of 34 to 38 64ths. But there really isn't that bigger much of an opening going in. So once you put the rubber gasket in there, which has a 36 64ths inside diameter, that's really kind of one of the limiting factors. And then where you can see it's milled out in the middle there, that's only about 34 64ths hole down the center there. So coming off of the splitters, you'll see a combination of these washers. As I mentioned, they have a 36 64th inner diameter, and so that you're going to see that several times throughout your system. You might put an adapter on the front end, which is a piece of hose with a female opening to tie up to your hose bib, and then a male opening to allow you to put another piece of hose on there without actually getting kinks in your main hose. These tend to have pretty much a straight shot through, against 36 64th of an opening on most of them, so that shouldn't necessarily add too much additional restriction going through, but take a look at that when you do buy them. If you look at one of these hose menders, they call this a barb fitting, where you put your old hose over top of the barb, and then you'll see what's left is just a certain opening here for water to pass for the hose itself. It kind of looks like this once you look down at there. Again, they're just usually in that 36 or slightly lower inside diameter feeding into the hose, and most hoses have an inside diameter of about 5/8 of an inch, which is 40 64ths. Speaking of hoses, they do make the hoses in 5/8, 3/4, and 1 inch, which basically is supposed to be the inside diameter of the hose itself. Most of what you'll see out there has that 5/8 inch, which is about a 40 64ths wall inside diameter, wall to wall. If you get the 3/4, it goes up to 48 64ths inside the wall, so they should have a little bit less restriction. But if you have a long run, maybe 100 feet or more, you should consider using a 3/4 inch type hose. One of the more interesting aspects is a lot of people are using these quick disconnect hose adapters to be able to avoid having to screw and unscrew from the hose bib, or from hose to hose, or from a hand nozzle at the end. You can tell there's different styles: metal, plastic, and clearly the size of the opening is going to be very important and determine how much water flow. And it turns out all three of these are designed to connect up to a 3/4 inch hose bib or hose, so they all have the same screw adapter and the same washer on the front end. but you'll get significantly different inside diameters. It turns out on these three, this style quick disconnect has a 32/64 opening. This only has a 22/64 opening. This has a 48/64 opening. These are the ones from Ely, Gardenia, and these are more the Orbit style. Next we have just the individual shut off. You got the very low end cheap ones that you see out there, and if you be amazed at how small that opening is on this particular yellow one there. The ball valve in there gives an opening of only 22/64 of an opening. The one on this larger one here, you can see has a plastic restrictor going in, and then a much larger ball valve inside, and it has an opening when that ball valve is open about 32/64. So this one's one of the better ones. And finally, at the end of the hose, we have our hose end sprayer. They come in a variety of types. Some have a built-in ball valve shut off. Some use a trigger. But if you look on this one here, which is just a twist shut off and twist thing, it has a very, very small opening of only 17/64, which if you've taken a lot of work to get all the water to the end, why would you drop it down to such a small opening for this particular style? On some of these other ones, they are more in the area of about 23/64. This particular one's a little hard to figure out because it's kind of a rectangular channel, and then it tapers on its way down to where the trigger is. So I'm not 100% sure what the equivalent inside diameter would be where that valve is. One of the better ones is this one here from Orbit. It appears to have a nice large opening of 42/64. So it uses a little bit smaller washer and a nice big channel there. But again, I don't know once you go up to the ball valve there what kind of restriction it has. Again, it doesn't have a lot of selections, but it should have a pretty good stream.